Hey everybody, this is Rob, Frontline Mindset with National Fire Radio. I am very excited today because I get to have a special guest on that I met back in 2020 when I was back in when COVID was a big thing there, right? The whole world was ending, and I was lucky enough to find sanity in Missouri, and I got to travel to a fire conference down there where I met Jonah Smith. So without further ado, Jonah Smith, welcome to Frontline Mindset. And for those who are out there that don't know you, why don't you give us just a quick snapshot of who you are.
Yeah, I'd agree with that sanity comment. I think all of us were going crazy and got to go out to Missouri and be kind of firefighters again and go do some cool stuff. So I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, went to a small private school. That's part of the story. And man, I had some free time during my senior year during a 2-week period we called mini-mester, and I wanted to do something cool. Tried to get on with the police to do a police ride along because back then Richmond was a pretty violent city. I thought it'd be pretty cool. And the cops turned me away because I wasn't 18 years old yet. So fire department, my mom met Jack McElfish, who some watching this may know. He just passed away. He got me in the fire service. He talked to my mom at Rotary Club, which was one of his passions, and said, "Hey, bring him on." He brought me in a shirt and tie to the fire station the first day. So that worked out really great for me. A rich kid from a private school shows up at your firehouse in a shirt and tie, and you know how that went after that. So did that, and then went to college because Jack became a super strong mentor of mine, and got my master's degree, got my bachelor's degree. Worked with sports during college. Worked with Lou Holtz my final year at South Carolina. I was his kind of on the field assistant, and then went on and worked with the baseball team. Went to the national championship game as I was an equipment manager, not a water boy. We dealt with all the clothing, so more jock straps than than water. But did all that, which was a really good, cool experience. Got to travel to places, and then got in the fire service in Columbia in 2003. Got on the Columbia Fire Department. Actually finished my thesis for my master's after auto extrication class. Had to do the defense of it, so good multitasker, I'd say. And then went to Charlotte, just made the decision to move north, a little bit more pay, bigger city. Always wanted to be a big city firefighter, and been serving there for 20 years in January. Served as a captain for 10 years, and then as a safety officer, which was a captain position, newly founded in the year you and I met in 2020. So we can all imagine how being a safety officer in a newly formed position in a metropolitan aggressive department during COVID was. It was great.
It was probably pretty easy.
Everything was fine. Everything was fine. Everybody liked us. No, it was a really good experience actually because it got our presence known in the field. We got to help a lot of people, getting quick tests so they could go see their family. Just a lot of things that we were able to show our worth that we wouldn't have been able to do any other circumstances. And got promoted to chief the year after. I think I've realized I should have just stayed in safety because it's a pretty good position. But no, I've been a chief now coming up on 4 years, and serve currently at our airport in Battalion 8, which I think is an important part of this podcast. I do come off the field outside the fence, but moving to a newly formed battalion, so pretty cool. I get to start a new battalion coming up in January with arguably, but I don't know that there's an argument, some of the best companies in our city. It'll be a very busy battalion, high fire duty. It's just north of our downtown area. And if you've ever been to Charlotte, you know that's where a lot of fires happen. So I'm super excited about that. And dealing with a lot of veteran officers, folks that have been on the fire department as long, if not longer than I have, and that just want to ride a fire truck. So it's going to be pretty cool. Got 2 kids, married, spend a lot of time like every other firefighter dad. When I'm off playing sports, watching sports, or paying for sports. So that's kind of my life. So
yeah. So, as a battalion chief, one of the things that I wanted to know is, like, for your leadership philosophy, like, what's the mindset that you carry into every shift as a battalion chief when you're getting ready for work? Like, what does that look like?
So I think it's a challenge as a battalion chief. Everybody says, man, adjusting to riding around a car by yourself, all these things, right, about being a BC. And one of the things I found is during safety, I adjusted to being by myself. And in some ways, I loved it because I can go do what I want. But the mindset from safety officer, the difference I saw is in a chief, actually the senior chief on my current shift right now, said, like, as a safety officer, you're worried about putting the fire out safely. As a chief, you're worried about putting the fire out, like putting all the things in motion. So it was it was kind of like throwing the car in first gear going down a hill. And when I switched from safety to chief, because it was like I was going to every fire in the city of Charlotte. We average somewhere in the neighborhood, and depends on how it's coded and all that. But we go to a decent amount of fires for a metropolitan department. But I was going to every one of them in a city of almost 1 million people. So I was seeing a lot of chiefs the way they managed, seeing a lot of chiefs the way they, and again, back to my discussion about being a safety officer, I was dealing with chiefs at a chief level as a captain in terms of mindset. How do you deal with difficult people? Like, hey,
Yeah.
Rob, you got to go home. You're quarantined. Well, I think this is BS. Well, in the background, I'm going, well, I mean, I don't disagree with you, but this is my job and I have to do it. So that led into some of the way both leadership and I know we're going to talk a little tactics in terms of that piece, but in terms of that, you can't sugarcoat, but you also can't come down with a backpack of napalm and burn everything down either. So
Right.
I think my philosophy, like, I go into work, I'll be driving in, and I am at the airport. So we can expand on that a little, but planes don't crash until they do, right? Like, planes do crash, but they never crash all at the same time.
Yeah.
In terms of mindset, I pull in and I come in on the backside of my still alarm. The primary thing that pays my salary is our airport. Well, I've never been associated with ARF, never been interested in ARF, but now I'm the chief on a shift of it. So I come in and I'm looking, which way are the planes coming in. So I know if I go out on the airfield, how I've got to talk, because the runways change directions based on how they're landing. Is it high traffic day? Because that's going to set my mindset of, coming up on the holiday around Thanksgiving, our airport is slammed, and we usually have some sort of incident in a peripheral area, not on the airfield, but in the terminal, and that affects directly my access as a battalion chief to that area. So it kind of may change the way I respond.
That's
go ahead.
just really quickly. That's an important part. Is that I think a lot of times my even misconception was our firefighting was just strictly the runway. You cover the terminal as well.
Yes, in Charlotte we do, and it varies. What I found, it varies. Charlotte, Houston, Atlanta, Denver, we all are municipal firefighters who then get assigned to the airport. So a lot of the folks that work for me in terms of mindset, like, they're on their way out, right? They've worked, a couple of folks have worked at busy companies their whole career, and they come out to the airport, man, to get their body back together, to get their marriage back together, to just recoup, to earn some extra money, because we do get 5%. Well, I don't, but they do. 5% extra pay for specialty pay. So those kind of things play into it, but we do respond to the terminal. Then I respond to outside the terminal. I've been super fortunate to be a part of the Firefighter Rescue Survey, and this is grab season, right? Like, December to February, there is a higher percentage of rescues made in our country from the data we're finding. And so, hey, what does that look like? We have some pretty hazardous apartments around us. We have residential hotels with low income. All those things play in, like, hey, man, it's cold today. Heating fires are likely, right? Like, I do think like that, because I'm a nerd, and I wouldn't be on here. You and I probably wouldn't be friends if I wasn't a nerd. but I think, and if you're listening to this podcast, you can't deny being a nerd because you're listening to a podcast about firefighting. So I think that plays into some of it. I think about how I'm going to lay my day out a lot. What am I going to do today that I need to do as a chief? What do my companies need to do? Where does that place? Like, Friday is a slam day for us. I'm already nervous about it because we got command training over at one of our stations. So I'm kind of handicapped because a lot of my companies will be out of service in that. And then I've got that. Then I've got a lunch meeting. Then I've got a meeting after lunch. And then I've got to do some other things. But I've still got to accomplish, I have to do some ARF training outside of just the command stuff. I have to do some simulated alerts before the end of the month. I've got a lot of things that I have to get done. So that plays into how am I going to lay my day out? And you know how that goes. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Right.
So I've got this grand plan of what I'm going to do in a day, and 4:00 in the afternoon, I've gotten one of the things done, and that was probably make sure that the staffing's done. And that's the only thing out of the 10 things I had on my list. So rolling in, I look at those things because I think it sets forth the day. As a battalion chief, I struggle, and I think a lot of chiefs that are very tactical in their thinking, right, that like being firefighters that are eat up into the job, I think struggle with not stepping on a captain's toes by overstepping by saying, hey, we're going to do this training. I'm going to teach it because I think it's important to let your officers do some of that. But I think that again, that if I set my plan coming in, then I can walk in the door with a plan to give to my company officers at roll call at 8 o'clock, or to send that 7 o'clock email. Hey, reminder, we got this. It's a busy day, folks. Make sure that they understand, whatever hazards we may be facing, whatever's closed around the airport. I mean, they're getting ready to close one of our main access roads to a certain part of town that's going to affect two of my engine companies, and especially me. That's a big thing to get on their radar so they can start having those discussions of, hey, we got to go this way to get here because this way is going to be a mile longer now because of a detour, or traffic in the afternoon is going to be awful in that area because we already know it's a high traffic area. So just things like that. And again, coming in the morning, I mean, I can tell you, I stop at the stoplight at West Boulevard and Steel Creek Road, and I look and I see which way the planes are coming, and I see how busy it is. And, it kind of sets forth a lot of things like, hey, I was going to do some training on the airfield today, and man, it looks like it is backed up. Like the other day, I don't even know what happened. It was just backed up. You could see it because it's kind of the crest of the hill, and you can see the airfield pretty well. It's like, well, we can't do any simulated stuff today because it's so busy. So
I know that, when I originally talked to you about some of this stuff, and I don't know if you can hear the dogs in the background, they're adding their 2 cents in, but the aircraft firefighting, like I was thinking of like the plane crashing and the worst case scenario, and I was like, man, like I don't, and it you said like you're like, yeah, but you know what, you train for something, you want to, not that you want a plane to crash and a bunch of people to die, but you like, it's also your job, and you're preparing for this and everything else. And then it dawned on me, there's other emergencies that happen, like landing gear catches on fire, there's smoke in the cabin, like the plane doesn't have to crash and disintegrate into a million pieces for you to have a response. Can you just kind of touch on what that might look like in some aspects?
Well, so I think that, again, I was exposed to ARF very briefly as a relief battalion chief. And in our organization, that means I'm the new chief. My first day as a battalion chief, I was in charge of a building that the only time I'd been in it was relieving. So relieving is like a substitute teacher. So for me, it was 2 years. I subbed in for chiefs, and nobody wants to go to the airport. Well, or nobody on my shift wanted to go to the airport. So I got sent out there, and I'm like, man, the airport. When I got out there, I'm like, man, this is actually pretty cool. And I've gotten to do some really, really cool things. There are things I will miss, but it's one of those places where you got to know all these things. And I will say this, like I have stretched a line to a wrong place in a fire. I have, pulled up to the wrong address. The difference with structural firefighting and ARF, and I actually talked to some former chiefs from San Francisco, with their incident out there. And one of the problems with it is there's not a lot of it's built on theory, and there's not a ton of experience even worldwide on an aircraft crash on the airfield. A lot of them, I think it's 50% go off the airfield because again, planes they're so much safer than they were when you and I were growing up, right? Wind shear and planes were laying down once, twice a year. Now we're not seeing that because of the safety system, all the technology that's good. Yeah. So the problem is we're asked to be, firefighters are asked to be, right, brain surgeons, whatever you say, right? And like the other night, last shift I worked, we had an APU fire, which is what keeps all the stuff going in the airplane or the aircraft. While it's essentially idling, right? It keeps all the electrical systems up, and it's what before they start up the drive engines, that's what keeps the aircraft going and everything else. We had an APU fire. Well, it was the first one anybody on my shift had been to that is at my station. So we pull up and it's already out, and I laughed because I said, man, even the fires out here extinguish themselves. But again, the technology, it's shut down, but how do you overhaul an
aircraft?
A $10 million aircraft? Because I can tell you, I'm not going to get a screwdriver out and start undoing stuff. Had it been a house, we'd have punched holes in the wall and done all that. And I looked at the pilot, because that's another thing. Yes, I'm the battalion chief, and if it's on fire, I'm in charge, but I'm still not in charge. The pilot can say, hey, we're not evacuating. He can kill everybody if he wants to. That's his call. Because pilots are a big deal. It'd be a pretty cool job in some ways, but they're the one who make the call for the stewardesses to evacuate or to shut down they do all those things. And so what I've found out there that's been a big mindset change at municipal, right? You show up in an apartment fire, who's in charge?
We are.
Yeah, you are. You're the deputy chief. You pull up and I'm in charge. Everybody comes to me, come to the green lights at the airport. For instance, when the Carolina Panthers, they were coming in, and the pilot turned a little too sharp, buried the wheels into the grass. I don't know if you know much about a 767, but it's pretty heavy. You're not
Can
just going to
imagine.
yank it out with a Chevy 2500. So that became a pretty massive incident because now I've got 200, I think it was 186 souls, that are famous people, right? In our area, like, Bryce Young and Jadeveon Clowney, all these names that you watch on TV and you're like, oh my God, they're walking out like, hey man, where do you need me to go? And it becomes a unified command piece too. So I think that that's another piece. Like we pull up at the terminal and a water leak turns into a massive incident because now I've got to get planes out the door. Like the airport doesn't stop even when it's on fire. And
Right.
if you have a plane with people, you can't just go, hey man, walk over to there to that door, because where they were going was a mile and a half. They were like, man, we can walk. And I looked at one of them and I wanted to say, like, I know you can run there, but it's about a mile and a half from where we're standing. It doesn't look like it, but you're a long way from getting to the place. Plus, it's a secured area. So I think
Yeah. There's other moving parts,
understanding
right? I mean, there's aircraft.
there's,
There's
man, we had a 10,000 gallon fuel leak. We were out there for 2.5 hours because it's not like you can't just throw kitty litter. Because you think about it, what does kitty litter become when it goes airborne? Well, it's going to beat up a $3 million engine if you start the engine up. So
yeah.
it's a lot of considerations. What it's done for me is a larger strategic idea of what an incident commander looks like. Also, what does a liaison look like? Like, American makes a lot of money, right? Each one of those aircraft they're flying are $30 million. So they got to make $30 million on each aircraft.
Hmm.
They make money by people moving, not by delaying flights and everything. So again, some of those incidents that I've run out there have been somewhat minor, but they turn into major incidents because there's a large economic impact for the company. And like, I'll give you an example. If our air tower catches on fire, and they have to actually dump the people, let's say you just have a small computer on fire up there, sprinkler system or halon system activates. That means they have to evacuate the tower, which they would probably still be moving planes as we were evacuating them. But once they unplug, all that air traffic goes to Atlanta. Well, I don't know if you know much about Atlanta. It's a pretty busy airport already.
Yeah.
Dumping the seventh busiest airport to the first busiest airport's going to be, I mean, we could have a catastrophic impact on air travel in the entire Southeast. If we dump planes, if I dump a plane on an airplane or a runway, that's millions of dollars we're spending of somebody else's money. So, and again, it's just interfacing with different agencies. Airport ops is an example. Like who the heck are they? Well, they pretty much run the airport. So
Yeah.
and then you're dealing with the FAA, trying to get in buildings and learn stuff, and it's a lot of stuff. It's changed my mindset. It's been a really good experience for me.
Do you find that from doing this that, like, so as, and I've only been in the position 8 months now, but as a deputy chief, right, like I've taken all my ICS classes. I've never used an ICS. Well, actually, that's not true. I used ICS forms to plan my wedding. Are you
Nerd.
Yeah, but tell you what, for
It
my
works.
ADHD, yeah, there's a reason we use it because it works, right? But are you finding maybe not the forms, but are you using that kind of structure as you're dealing with the airport, the FAA? I'm sure there's a law enforcement agency that has, and plus you're an international airport, so you have a federal agency as well, right? I mean, all of these things are kind of like, do you find, because I think in the fire service, we talk about the expansion of unified command and all of these sheets, and even like some people like will say like, oh, the blue card firefighter, right? Like, but this is a scenario where you have to use it. And I think back to like East Palestine when that oil train thing, all that, just like, you're now in that incident mindset. Like, it doesn't have to be the airport. It could be like, it very quickly could transition to your community. But do you find yourself having to use those resources, or does it just, like, I don't want to say it comes naturally because it's probably like falling off a bicycle, it hurts every time, but
I think in our organization, our airport has grown exponentially since I joined. They've built another runway. We're building. I mean, we're 2 fire stations, new ones on the airfield. We're seventh busiest in the country. They say, I don't know, that based on arrivals and departures or something. There's all these numbers they use to pump it up. But either way, it is I mean, every day you come in and there's a new wall up somewhere in the terminal, there's new gates open, and there's something. And I think that my experience out there has, again, through expectations, like you hear the stories. I had some pretty good out there until you get certified to drive on the airfield. You have a driver because you have to. So some of those young guys, one of them was younger guy. One of the guys was getting ready to retire, leaned on them, and they kind of told me like, "Hey, don't be an idiot out here. You got to look at the bigger picture." So that kind of made me think, now I'm open to feedback. So I was like, okay, well, listen to these guys. One of the guys been out there his whole career and he's one of the big ones that's been out there his whole career and can tell you about everything about both the terminal and the airfield, not just the roads out there.
Mm-hmm.
He's really good reputation in our department of who he was and has been out there. And I think that listening to them really set that mindset forward. So when I came out there as an assigned chief, not just the guy who's coming in, once a month, it really set my mindset on that. And then, one of my goals was always to bridge the gaps, because part of the reason is there's all these silos of things, right? The FAA is here and they get mad because we do X, Y, Z. And then CMPD gets mad because we do this. And, Air Ops doesn't know what incident command is because they're not really trained, but they don't really value it because they don't understand it. And,
Right.
and so there's also blind spots in that. Like, so, on my shift, we went and met with Air Ops on second shift, and we're like, hey, man, in my car, I have an iPad, I have a dry erase board, I have multiple radios, we have, areas we can write on. We can all sit in the car and coordinate this, or we can just do our own thing and, blow up in our face. And so some of that was one of my goals. Another goal was like sitting down with the FAA tower and talking to the controllers. Like, hey, when we do, this is why Battalion 8 drives across the airfield all the time. Here's why, here's my philosophy, here's what I do. And it ended with the FAA controllers coming to our station and understanding that an ARF truck and an engine company are very different. But on the radio, all they know is Blaze. We're called Blaze trucks so they just hear Blaze 8, Blaze 17. They don't know that's a battalion chief in a pickup truck that can't see over the crest of the runway at night, and an engine company who may be responding to a medical call off the field and have to come in a different gate because it frustrates them, right? They like,
Yeah.
airplanes come in this way, they send them this way. So when we're coming in at different places, it frustrated them. And some of those discussions, I mean, for God's sake, last Christmas, a year ago, we were up in the tower for 2 hours or an hour and a half with the controllers, watching their job, learning what they were doing, because we were doing our little Santa Claus radio thing that we do every year in Charlotte, where, you call in Santa's sleigh. And it was really cool because the controllers explained what they do. We saw what they did. Our structural companies caught a couple calls while we were up there, and we could see them because, our tower's tall. It's like, hey, they're like, where are those guys going? We're like, they're going to an apartment fire right over there. That's why and they were like, oh, that makes sense, man. So that's been a big piece and just like everybody says, relationships is what,
Yeah.
East Palestine's a good example, right? When that happens, if I don't know, hey, Rob, you're the CSX guy for our area, come to the command post, it doesn't work as well. If I go, hey, Rob, and you're like, hey, Jonah, how's the kids, man? Oh, man, it's great. Hey, come over here. I'm going to put you over hazmat since your hazmat guys are here, because I already know your capabilities, right? And that's a piece of understanding. People don't know what the fire department offers, CMPD, how many, just a variety of things out there that, again, have bled over, or I would say there's been bleed over on the, I call it Gen Pop, where I'm going back to Gen Pop now.
Yeah.
We did some training with CMPD on active shooter. Some role play stuff where it came out as a fire alarm, turned into an active shooter incident, which is how, the one in Nashville came in as a fire alarm originally. And we built out based on time, and we have some really knowledgeable folks who designed that training, but it showed CMPD, hey, the car with the green light's the guy in charge, right? And when the car with the green light is the guy in charge, that's where you go, because we have these capabilities, right? Soon we're getting new battalion cars. We're going to have TV screens, computer mounts. We've got an iPad. Like we explained to CMPD, if you guys want to do a technical search of this building with SWAT, I've probably got a building layout, or at least a map we can locate on Google, and I can hand you this tablet and go, here. And your lead SWAT guy can go, hey, you search room 206, 207, kids that are trapped are in 209. It's the third door on your right. Like, that's information that, a police officer in a Ford Crown Vic isn't going to know. And I think that's, again, that mindset's helped me wrap my head around. We've had a couple active shooters in Charlotte. Unfortunately, there was one yesterday, right? These are incidents we're going to respond to that man, you go to the big tanker, train accidents happen all over this country too. You go to the train wreck and you don't know the train people. It's not, they don't understand emergency response unless it's their emergency response trained folks, right?
Yeah.
And when that guy gets there, because it's usually Jonah Smith, right? He just pulls up in a pickup truck and he throws on his CSX hazmat gear. He's
Mm-hmm.
like, "Hey guys, I'm the hazmat guy." He understands what we do because he's done some training with our hazmat people. But
Right.
in the command post, setting up that piece is so important prior to the incident. And I think it's kind of cliche in a way, right? But that's kind of where I'm at with that.
There you are. Sorry, I
Yep.
lost you for a moment there. The last thing I caught from you was that the CSX guy pulls up in the truck. He's got his gear and he knows what he's doing because he's done some
Yep.
training with us. So, but yeah, and I think it's the idea of like the Asher drills doing there was I took a class up in New England, and they were talking about using community events as practice for Asher drills because exactly what you're saying, like that's where you get to meet the police officers and the emergency management people and
Mm-hmm.
DPW, and you make the like go to those events if the city is deploying or the county or whoever the government is deploying an emergency management team to help with a large scale event. Go there and actively participate and ask the questions while it's not an emergency, like 5Ks, races, marathons, all these things, because you kind of start building those relationships, and
Yep.
I would imagine like some of this has bled out, so when you leave the fence, so to speak, and you go back into
Mm-hmm.
gen pop, some of these skills have helped out as a battalion chief operating outside of the airport.
Well, and Rob, I think something important to emphasize because it's called National Fire Radio, not Metropolitan Fire Department Radio, right? Like
Yeah.
one of the things that I found, we actually did a battalion chiefs academy in South Carolina. Myself and Richard Ray, one of my closest friends. He's a great guy, much better person than I am. He's a BC in Durham, and one of the things we were really passionate about ensuring we talk to the students about is escalating events, right? Because in Charlotte, man, if I have a train crash, I'm going to get like 19 division chiefs, the fire chief. I'm going to get all this support and help, right?
Safety officers.
Right. You're gonna get a lot of stuff, and we put
Yeah.
like Liberty Road. We had a 5 alarm fire, and we still didn't run out of. We ran low on companies, but you're in Dirt Road Fire Department, freshly minted career fire department in the middle of South Carolina or North Carolina or New Hampshire, wherever you want to pick, right?
Yeah.
And that BC may be the guy. Like there might be a volunteer fire chief, there may be a big, but you have a plane lay down, you have, that train crash, you have some sort of incident, right? That and the best, I mean, it's ironic, but when we did the BC Academy, it was late September. A lot of people listening know what happened in late September, early October here in the Southeast. We had one of the most damaging hurricanes inland since Hurricane Hugo in 1990. And in that class, there were two battalion chiefs who I looked at one of them. I said, man, you might be dealing with this at the end of the week, not knowing that it was going to be one of the worst events in our state. And
Right.
the state where I work in, and I live in South Carolina, the state I live in, just west of me. I mean, I was fine with groceries and everything else, but there were people who didn't have power for 2 weeks. The city of Asheville did not have running water for over a month that was potable, that you could actually drink. And some of those chiefs in some of those areas were, they're having to be in that mindset. And I don't know that all of them are probably prepared because, again, it's the Dirt Road Fire Department. You got four firefighters, a battalion chief, maybe a station captain, and it's 6 rigs and you got 5 people, right? And I think that's the majority of the growing career fire service, right? Like
Yes.
Philadelphia, Charlotte, all these big places. We've had people for years. But you start looking at like my area where I live, where it's growing and we're forming a career fire department. That guy's got to know how to pull the red handle too.
Mm-hmm.
You got to know, like South Carolina, we had, I mean, it's super ironic and I hope it was helpful to these chiefs, but we had 2 or 3 who dealt. I mean, Pickens County was one of the chiefs. He's like, yeah, I worked Friday. I bet that dude didn't get off work till Sunday because of what he had. But having State Fire, which is our fire academy / state fire marshal organization, knowing how to get to the state warning point, right? To call like, hey, I need it all. Like, what do you need? I don't know. I need everything you got. Send it here.
Yeah,
Knowing
yeah,
how to get those resources going and understanding that their mindset is me. I'm going, where's the division chief? Where's the division chief? And he's going, man, I hope the state gets here soon. It's a very different mindset in terms of resources, that getting chainsaws, like where do you find 50 chainsaws to clear roads so you can go to that house fire? Like
right,
all those things. And I think that's a chief mindset in smaller parts of the country that me, right, as a guy that's fortunate to share and teach and be a metropolitan battalion chief, like I've got it easy in some ways, right? Yes, I have some hazards that they don't have, but man, you go out to, the middle of the XYZ county and they have what they had in the western part of South Carolina and North Carolina come through. Like there are a lot of fire departments represented in that don't have paid staff either. So like
right,
the fire chief, who's been the fire chief since 1974, is now dealing with something, and the only reference point he has is 1990, if he had that as a reference point. So I think if you're a smaller chief, you got to think about that even earlier, or know more about your resources. And that's just getting out and calling your like you mentioned emergency management, calling your emergency management people in the county and going, hey, if I needed a generator, do you guys, like, who brings that? Or, oh man, we got one at the warehouse. Okay, because that's in my mind when I go, fire station doesn't have power, city hall doesn't have power. That's our rally point for this incident, because the county EM, we're not in the county seat, right? We're not in the downtown, but we have an area we got to protect. Going through that is a big piece of some of these chiefs' lives, because they might be a 40-hour battalion chief, they may be a 3-shift, but those guys are holding the bag in these escalating incidents. And man, it's going to be even worse if you haven't reached out and said, hey, like Asheville, think about that. They had no water in a city. I don't know how big Asheville is. It's at least 200, 300,000 people. They had no water. Like
right.
somebody had to pull the handle and go, I need tankers. Well, who else needed tankers? Probably everybody around them, because they had the same problem. So it's just little things like that I think we neglect, both as instructors and a metro chief. Like I got plenty of help coming. We've got EM, we got all these things. And you go out to, some of the places on the way to Lake Ozark, right? Like they have a major incident. They're holding the bag until maybe one of these metro departments gets there, or the USAR team or state EM gets there, those kind of things. So I think that's important.
Shifting gears a little bit, I just, you spent a lot of time on an engine company as a captain before the promotion. How has your leadership style evolved since that time when you first started, when you first promoted to now?
Well, so I was a 5-year captain, which is a hated entity in our fire department, right? I was very young. I was 30 years old, so I'm not going to say that's super young, but that's young in the fire service. So very timid, very kind of laissez-faire. Yeah, exactly. But again, cautious, because I don't want to piss Rob off. And in our organization, you're also a relief captain, so I got to figure out this company and this company and you're in a battalion, but to figure that out first, very timid, very not wanting to rock the boat. And I think that's every captain. I think that's every lieutenant, whatever it is. I really think that's just as a chief, right? Like a 2-year chief, Jonah Smith, is very different than a 4-year chief, Jonah Smith, because you get experience, you seek out answers, you get the experience, right? And I think, and it's not just the experience of the calls, it's the experience of the dinner table argument where you make the mistake of not stopping a conversation, and you're laying in bed and you're like, man, if the chief called about that conversation, like that's gonna be on me, and going, that's not gonna happen again. And those kind of things that, again, I think we neglect. Okay. We talk a lot about, right? We talk a lot about tactics and fires and all that, man. Most of leadership and management happens at the firehouse, because then that can set the tone, should you have the tactical knowledge, right, of the fire ground. And I think I was very timid at first, didn't want to rock the boat, and uncomfortable with uncomfortable situations and confrontations. Just didn't have it in me, right? And I think through my experience, that's one of the reasons I knew I was young when I got promoted, I was going to value the captain position, and I would never go back. I would do captain for more years than I would less, because you have those difficult conversations with difficult or not difficult employees, like your friends. A bunch of my friends have worked with me and for me, And those conversations are some of the most difficult. Well, now that I've done some of that, right, as a chief, like, it's business in a lot of ways. Like, if you come in the office and I'm like, hey, Rob, you screwed up, and you go, yeah, I'm sorry, and I go, yeah, you screwed up, what did we learn? And then you walk out, like, we can still eat dinner together. Whereas before,
Right.
I'd be like, well, does he like me? I don't know if he's mad. And now it's whatever, man. Like, you make friends in the fire service, you make enemies in the fire service. And as long as you're doing the right thing, I think that's what you got to consider.
I
But
think
that
that's
takes
such a
time, you know?
yeah, that's such a pivotal thing too, because I know, like when you were just talking about like, hey, like, well, it's not like the city of Philadelphia or the city of Charlotte just pops up somewhere. It's smaller departments where it's 4 to 5 people, battalion chief, maybe an officer, and you are close. So like that is I know for me that was a huge struggle, is having a hard conversation with people that you respected and that you're, but like also at one point I was like, I realized like, hey, it's disrespectful not to have the conversation. But yeah, you've got to be uncomfortable having the uncomfortable conversation, and it's part of the. I don't want to sound like holy and say like it's part of your duty, but like one of the duties that I feel as an officer you have is to protect your members, and sometimes that's protecting them from themselves,
Well,
and saying like, hey, like whether it's a tactical thing that could get them hurt, whether it's something that could hurt them, by like you said, not stopping the conversation because it's just nobody's like, hey, I'm going to say something really stupid today at work and get everybody jammed up. Like it's starts out innocent enough, and that train starts going, and you have to be able to put the brakes on it and be like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
and I think that's one of the weaknesses in the fire service, frankly. I know it is in my organization. We have a lot of young officers. And I'm included in that, right? Like, I've been a chief 4 years, and I've been on just coming up on 20. Do I fail at that? Absolutely. On a daily basis at work. Am I the perfect chief? Absolutely not. But do I learn from my mistakes? Yes. Have I gotten in trouble? Have I had conversations with my boss and my bosses over the years? Absolutely. Have I done things and done stupid stuff and said things I shouldn't say, or done things I shouldn't do at work, even since I made chief? Absolutely. But the point is, you got to learn from that, right? And not
Right.
just continue to spin your wheels. And I think that if more captains, like in any organization, I wouldn't limit this to mine, but if more captains handle problems the way that need to be handled, chiefs would be able to not look so bad sometimes. Because when there's certain problems cross onto a battalion chief or division, whatever your rank structure, a white shirt's desk,
Mm-hmm.
there's only one way some of that goes, right? That the book's pretty
Yeah.
clear when it says this. When it comes to the chief's office, if you go, hey, can we do this, chief? Usually the answer is no. The captain didn't want to be the bad guy. So I think that that's a huge thing with fire officers, is learning to mitigate things at the lowest level. And we always say that in a class, we say that in the firehouse, but practice sometimes. And it goes back to who was I as a captain in my first couple of years? Very timid. I'm sure my battalion chief was the same way, felt the same way as I do, of like, why did he just, like, you get those phone calls, and I know you get them too, like, why did they just call me? I feel like that's my kid going, hey, Dad, should I study for this test? And you go, yeah, and he's just looking for affirmation of his decision.
Right.
Well, or for you to make the decision for him because they don't know. And I think that's an important thing to understand as a company officer. The quicker you handle stuff, the easier it is. There are some things that got to go straight up the chain. I get it. Harassment, discrimination. You wreck a truck, and there's a lot of things that got to go up, but there's a lot of things that don't have to, because when they come up, if something rolls across, and I think a friend of mine, mentor of mine, he said it on a podcast recently, Chief Farnham, he's one of our division chiefs. It sticks with me what he said on that podcast a couple weeks ago. He said, by the time something comes to my desk, the easy answers are out the door. And that is 100%. As you go up in rank, the captain said, like, you say, hey, I want to do X. And your captain's like, nah, man, we can't do that. Or whatever. As it goes up the chain, the easiest answers are gone, right? The captain usually calls the chief because he can't figure it out. Then when the chief can't figure it out and she calls above her, man, that answer, like your number of answers, again, it's starting to shrink down to, and I know firefighters, because I'm 100% guilty of this. There's nothing that pisses off any of us more than you go to a meeting And Chief Ridley's like, well, man, we're going to have to get back to you. And everybody's like, the chief doesn't know. They want to take pitchforks and fire to the headquarters. And sometimes it's absolutely placating people. But sometimes it is literally such a difficult answer that they have to get back to you, right? And I think that undermines trust. And the more people understand the fire service, like, man, when it gets to, depending on the structure of your organization, when it gets to the BC division chief, like ours, deputy fire chief, like those answers don't just, it's not like, oh, well, let me look on. Yeah, that's the answer right here. No, and that's why our chiefs a lot now in meetings are asking for answer or questions ahead of time so that they're not placating people in the meetings. But I think that's just something to understand, that especially the size of the organization dictates a lot of that.
Yeah. And like you said, there's certain hot topics that, like, you don't pass go, you do not collect $200. You go, straight to whatever the next step. And sometimes I think too, like, as firefighters, we forget, and just in this, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too much, so just pull me out here in a second. But, like, there's a liability of, like, we'll just use harassment as an example, because it's not just the firehouse anymore. When you start using terms like, hey, I feel harassed, or I went and talked to Jonah about using this term to describe me as a northerner or something, whatever, I'm just trying to conjure up something. But, like, there's a law that's on the back end of this that's outside the firehouse. And if the department doesn't take care of the issue, or it's presented in such a way, like, they could be fined, they could be sued, like, and I don't want to be in a civil suit based on harassment because I didn't handle an issue. So, like, sometimes I just find, and I don't know if, like I said, if I'm off base here, but, like, the firefighters aren't thinking about that bigger picture. They're not looking at it from 30,000 foot.
They shouldn't. I mean, they're firefighters. So that was something I forgot to say. I'm glad you brought it up.
Okay, thank you.
My job as a BC is also to protect the organization. I need to protect the people that work for me and with me. But at the same point, I got to protect the namesake where my paycheck comes from. And I think people forget that, like, you are, as you go up in rank and gain responsibility, your responsibility to protect the organization from harm is, it gets almost, it's not ever even, right? You should always protect the people that work, your direct reports, right?
Right.
But when they do something to damage here, like, that may go down, and I think people forget that because the organization, again, they're going to sue me and the city if, there's been things going on in my department in the past, and any fire department, right? We could go through this offline, of things that have happened. Well, they've always been wrong. Like you said, well, now they've always been, like, taping somebody in a desk chair has always been by the letter of the law. The law has not changed in the state of anywhere I've lived. Like, has always been assault, right? And some of it's been accepted, but people forget, and I was a union steward, and this was one of our things for a while, is, like, in the end, it is a workplace. Like, the city of Charlotte, when we do ethics training, doesn't go, well, at the firehouse, you can call somebody a dumbass. Like, do we sometimes? Absolutely. Do we joke with people way more? Like, the water cooler talk at the city manager's office is probably not the same as it is at the firehouse. But in the end, does that mean we can just say whatever we want, do whatever we want? And, well, it's, HR is going to go, no, it's the firehouse. It's different. Right. They don't care. They don't care. And that's, again, as answers are asked for more up, that answer becomes more like, no, you can't roll Rob out on the front pad and tape to a desk chair and say, I'm the new guy. Like, that was never okay. And I hate saying it because, I mean, that's, the firehouse banter is one of my favorite, but then when the fire chief gets a picture sent to him, it's not like he's going to be like, well, I know it's the firehouse. So no, he's going to go, hey, Chief Smith, what are you going to do about this? And I'm going to go, well, I'm, here's the box I'm in. This is all I can do now. Right. And I think, and people forget that there are words that we use informally, formally, jokingly, and those words offend people, and they've always offended people. And so it's not like, oh man, back in the 80s, this would have never happened. No, in the 80s, people just didn't feel strong enough to step up and say anything. And it was still wrong to do what you're doing in 1964 or 1922, but it was the culture, and not that there's parts of culture I miss, but some of that is like, you know, ribbing someone and bullying someone are two very different things to me. And I think that's, again, but when the person throws the wrong thing, here you are, right? You're
Yeah.
as your rank goes up, that box gets, here I have 7 options as an officer. I'd have 4. I have 2, but then as a BC, there's certain things when certain things happen and you don't fix them, and it's been evidenced by some departments in my area with some legal actions and some hiring and firing happening, that there's things that you might think are funny. Like I could tell you the story and you'd laugh about it, but in the moment, that chief and those captains did not fix the problem, and they lost their job and faced lawsuits. And I mean,
Right.
it is what it is, man. Like, and the city settled and all those things, but they're used as an example of things not to do.
I always
That's
think
not
of,
where, like you said, I don't want to ever be on a lawsuit, and I also don't want to ever be in a class of like case study number 7, Battalion Chief A.
I always think about what's his it's the Michael Abshroff, It's Your Ship, when he says the whole how are your actions today going to read on the front page of the New York Times or the Washington Post, and that's like, and as I've, you talk about moving up and the box getting smaller, there have been times where I've been like, oh yeah, this is gonna be really funny, and all of a sudden that thought comes in my head, and I was like, actually no, this isn't gonna be funny. Stop. And
But you know how you fix some of that? You stay in the office.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But I'll say this too, Robert. I think there's a great quote. And if you follow the blogosphere and all that, you know who Dina Ali is. She's a battalion
yeah,
chief out of Raleigh, and she had, again, sometimes people put stuff up on Facebook or in a conversation, and it strikes you. And one of the things she said that is so true, and I've lived this too, is every firefighter that walks in the front door of a fire station throughout the world should feel like they belong. They don't fit in sometimes. And a lot of the time, we got some weird people in the fire station, right? But everyone should feel as though they hold a stake and they belong. And that belonging versus fitting in, the lines get so blurred around the firehouse. Well, he doesn't fit in. What does he? What do you feel part of the team? Do you? And I think that's a challenge, because sometimes the not fitting in can lead to not feeling like you belong. But I think that's part of the leadership of an organization, right? Is we put together HVAC technicians to Waffle House cooks, put them on a fire truck, and want them to perform at a high level, right? With
right,
different skill sets. There's folks in my job who literally escaped, political genocide, all these things. We have folks from Cuba, from Southeast Asia. We have folks from all over of different backgrounds. And then I told you my story. My dad was a urologist. Lived a pretty good life as a kid, but we all work together. It's not like I'm better than that person. And that's one of the best things about the fire service, right? So
yeah,
then why can't that guy who grew up with zero money and zero, parental structure, whatever, why can't we make them a firefighter? Well, we can. We're going to put them through recruit school. No, man. Like, becoming a firefighter is more than that. And part of that is the fellowship, brotherhood, and the belonging in the fire station. I think that's because once someone feels like they don't belong, and if you read up on this, and this is what Dean Ali has really hammered home since Chief Rhodes' speech last year at FDIC, a lot has been leadership can literally turn someone into a mental health problem.
right,
And I think that goes back to that belonging. If you don't feel like you belong in an organization, you do less, you're less dedicated, you become way more negative, you become way more problematic for admin. And again, if I don't feel like I belong to XYZ fire department, like the reputation of that fire department, I don't care. Like, whatever, man, I'm just here to do a job. I'm just here. You guys don't want me, that mindset develops. So I think
yeah.
that's a big piece for people to consider is, are you, like, there's weird people, right? I get it. Like I've said, the fire service is like a factory for weird people, and
Yeah,
here's
I'm a weird
here's
guy.
one of
Like,
them.
I mean,
Yeah, here's one of them. But the point is, do I feel like I belong when I walk in the door and put on my shirts? Do I feel like I belong to the organization that I'm employed by, or volunteer? And especially when you talk volunteer, if I don't feel like I belong in a volunteer organization, I'm not going to show up, because why am I here? Like, and So I think that's just something to consider in a leadership position is everybody's got to have a stake. And some of it may be you give them a t-shirt every month so they feel like they belong. But some of it may be you've got to plug them in. And as a chief, like pick on that captain who's good at, I don't know, size ups. He's really good, gives good radio reports, and he's good at assessment centers. So guess what? We're going to do a battalion training for all the firefighter twos that ride the seat. And I'm going to pick you, Robert. You're the guy. And he goes, wow, my chief, at least, those little things mean a lot to people. And I think that goes to that leadership mindset where I work for chiefs. Barbara Beam, who's since died of cancer, a lot of people in my department, did not like her, everything else. And, maybe I'm the weird one, but every one of us that worked for her absolutely would kill for her because she was a fantastic chief to work for, because she looked at me as a junior captain and said, hey, I want you to do some battalion training. What have you seen that you think we need to work on? And I was like, okay. And she said, make the schedule, send it out. Any questions to me, and do it. And she literally just came out there and visited. She wanted, she was challenging me. Well, that's not just Jonah. She did it to every captain in the battalion, picked on them for something. We did a land search. One of the guys was big into land search and search operations. He's on our USAR team. Guess what? Went to a park. He told his kid, go to the woods, and they found his kid. Like, excellent battalion training that we're using as an example of things now currently. That I think that's a piece, is making people feel like they belong to wherever you are. Your station, even, microcosm of the fire department, right, in our organization, your station, your shift, then maybe the station in general, then maybe the battalion on your shift. But I think that's a big piece that I want to add in.
So for you, as we're shifting gears here, like how do you keep a clear head when you're dealing with, like, you take all this other stuff here, now you apply it to an emergency incident. How do you keep a clear head in, like, high stress situations?
Well, I'm not perfect, right? But I think it's reps. I think it's experience, because so yes, I said I made captain in 5 years. Well, prior to that, I was a volunteer captain in Columbia, because I left Columbia, so it makes sense to everybody. Left Columbia as a career member, went to Charlotte, and still lived in Columbia after I got out of recruit school. I went back to volunteering with the Columbia Fire Department because they do have, in the outlying areas of the county, they have volunteers. Well, where I lived was suburban area. Very good fire duty, very busy. I think to the neighborhood of, we'll say 1,500, 2,000 calls. And I think before I made captain in Charlotte, I had commanded like 8 or 10 fires prior to the career staff getting there. So it was a really good experience for me, because did I yell? Yep. The time I almost caught the brush truck on fire because I forgot you pull into the black, not the unburned part, and the wind shifted, and I was like, BT 27 to Central, and I'm yelling, and the guys get there and they were laughing at me. I'll never forget. I was like, it was one of them, like, you go like this, you just go. They're right. So that's some of it. I think reps, and I do think, anybody who's ever, see my name in somewhere, right, knows that I love engine work. I love initial operations. I love the tactics part of the job. And as a BC, I think that makes me a little more confident in it. The thing I will, and again, going back to Gen Pop, where I'm going to be going to more first due fires than I do now, I think the first few, because it's funny, I'm doing a podcast and getting ready to go to a new battalion, so the captains will be wearing me out of the fire station about it. But I think, so this is my parachute, right? I'm going to screw up my first couple fires. But I think that's a big thing is just the reps, right? Even as a relief chief, I think that helped with my level of calmness, because the fires I was having and was in command of were with companies quite often I didn't know a lot about. So I had to have more confidence in those officers. So the first few, what do you think I was doing? Command Engine 1, do you have an update? Command Engine, and I'm like, and then I'm sitting in the car afterwards, and I'm like, I was an idiot. Like, why am I doing this? And so then it led to, my boss saying, man, you don't talk to the companies a lot. And I said, and I explained it to him. He's like, no, it goes fine. It's just, it changed. What changed? And he and I had a discussion about it, because I think that's something when you're a new chief, a new captain, you want a lot of updates because you're used to being the update, right? You're used to being in there pulling, sealing. Now you're sitting outside going, I don't like that. I don't like that. What's going on? I need to know what that is.
I feel like it's that line from the one homicide series on HBO, but it's like time is a flat circle, and
Yeah.
when you're doing it, man, when you're the update, like it's like this, but when you're out, that's one thing I've noticed being outside, just even on fire alarms, man, like you don't have anything to occupy your time, so it is that flat circle, and you're just like, all right,
Well,
like
and you
what'd
feel
you
like
find?
you feel like you should be doing something,
Yeah.
and in reality, you should be doing nothing. And yes, but that's where I think the reps, right,
Mm-hmm.
come into that of, even if it's running a real scenario in a sim lab, those reps where it's not like engine one's on scene, engine two's on scene, where it's actually engine one's on scene, you're going, where in the hell is engine two? Where's engine two on a fire? Because you're seeing X happening and you need Y to happen, but for Y to happen, you have to have engine two and ladder two there, and you're like, where are they? And giving you that time clock, right, to pump the brakes to realize, okay, they're going to do that. Hey, I'm going to give them this update. Hey, it appears it is in the attic. I'm going to get a second line above you. I think that, and then, man, just some of the conversations I've had with people, because I'm fortunate to get to go to different conferences and stuff to learn from others' experience, right? Experience is experience. I can't
Right.
go, if I could go to 100 fires every year, I'd be super happy, but I'm not going to. What I can do is learn from somebody else's 50 fires and go to 50 and blend that experience with my experience. And I think that's something you're seeing a lot of with the online piece. And people are like, oh, you can become a Facebook fireman. I always joke I've got like 4 years service in Kentland because I've watched so many Kentland videos, right? But that doesn't
Right.
equate to actual experience. But what it does is prepares your mindset for the experience you will get. And then, to me, going to a class about, with a guy from the FDNY, completely different, went to one at FDIC, completely different mindset, more people, different building stock than Charlotte or Indian land where I live. But what it gives you is that, oh, wait a second, they do that. I could, and then I blend it to what I've experienced or what I expect to experience and then when I get back and I screw it up, I know I've screwed it up, instead of a lot of people, they're the chief, the captains are scared of them because they're not open or whatever, and they just go on doing the dumb stuff they've done for 15 years and nobody tells them, hey, you're being dumb. Well, I'd rather somebody come up and be like, chief, that was the worst, because my first fire, man, I wasn't used to, I'd commanded fires in the volunteers. Columbia doesn't have as much concentrated staffing, but I used to be the assistant chief at my volunteer department. So I'd commanded some fires, but with a lot less people. Well, you start putting 27 people in an 800 square foot house, the captains are going to come out cussing you. Because I want everybody to get work, right? I'm a firefighter.
Yeah.
I want people to get work. Well, one of the things I learned early on is like, there's going to be 4 companies standing in the yard and 2 working, because you can't put everybody in. I think, again, those reps and just me not having the blind spot, me understanding when I screw up. And I mean, I'll set the expectation next month with my officers. If I screw up, call me out in the right way. Don't come out of the fire and start yelling at me, but come over and let's have a conversation and say, hey, that was dumb, because I value that, because while it's important for me to get my captains to continue to grow, it's just as important for me as a chief to grow, based on, your direct reports are going to be honest with you if that door's open. And I'm not oh, I got an open door policy. Like I have, and my new officers, whenever you publish this, will learn. I have expectations I hand them. We go over them, and then I come back and I pull out my ledger, my iPad, and I write down what they expect from me. And I do look at that, and then I come back. I'm not going to say quarterly, but I come back and say, hey, man, hey, Rob, what do you think? How do you think I'm doing on? You said when I got here, you wanted open communication, you wanted clear expectations set, and you wanted me to leave you alone. How am I doing on those 3 things? And I expect, and I've gotten honest feedback. I've had a captain pull the door shut and said, we need to talk, and it wasn't in a violent manner. He said, you're messing up, and that conversation's very valuable. So
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's part of all that to say, understanding when you screw up has also helped me grow and be more confident. And when you get confident on the incident, scene, that helps with the command presence. And again, you're not going to be calm if you're something you've never seen or experienced, or nobody's ever calm. But what you
Right.
have to do as an incident commander is, if I start yelling, you're going to start yelling, and I got to control that, and that comes with some level of experience and self-reflection, all those things.
I think it's interesting. One of the things I do on the side is I'm a firearms instructor, and in New York State, the primary reason that there's two reasons people get their pistol permits. One is for they're interested in shooting sports, and in order to have a pistol, you need to have a pistol permit. And the second one's self-defense. And usually there's some kind of incident that sets them off into this path. And I'm not there to judge them at all. I'm here to do the job of making sure that they understand safe ownership and use of force for a firearm. But one of the things that I always tell them is like, if you've never been punched in the face, figuring out how to react to that after you've been punched is hard. And I'm not saying that I'm here to punch you in the face, although if you want to sign a consent form, I can do that for you. But in all honesty, like, you have to visualize what the attacks look like. You have to, if you're scared about being attacked for whatever reason, you have to, one, answer that question as to why you're scared, and then you have to start visualizing what that attack is going to look like so you can see it beforehand. And mental visualization for me, even to the point of like the draw stroke and how I punch out with my firearm and everything out and do the presentation, I have to, like, I visualize that. I visualize how I put my gear on. I visualize how I'm going to show up at that. I'm trying to see that fire. And when you talked about before about being a Facebook fireman or a YouTube firefighter, and that, like, I think there's such value in that, because it's not just looking at a video, but like, you need to, like, because I've always said, like, how do you build that experience when you don't have experience, right? And thankfully today with the internet, you can get a lot of experience. But I always like there's things when I'm watching a video, I have a stopwatch on my command board, because I have like one of the simple case fire commanders from American Trademark. I hit the stopwatch when I hear the parking brake, just because I want to see how long it takes the engine company to get the line off the rig and get the line charged. And and then there's my benchmarks that I've set for myself of like, am I going to hear the universal call sign of distress? So I'm going to hear the primer pull, like for 60 seconds or whatever, but these are the things that I do to kind of help build the experience and set the expectations. And I just think that, people you have to adjust, you have to adapt. But if you don't see it before it happens, you're going to have, and you can't see everything, but you've got to prepare for what's happening and what's coming down the line.
But that's where I think that a lot of that comes in training, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and I think we all struggle with that. I'm in my new battalion. I have a very busy company. I mean, I have two of the top 5 engine companies. I have, some of the saltiest officers, and then contrast that where I'm at now. I have 2 engine companies that are middle of the pack. They're not slow. And then I've got ARF folks. Well, how do you time compress, how do you make an ARF firefighter know that they those trucks only operate under 2 conditions, on or off. Yes, yeah. When we're going to a plane in distress, right, which there's a lot of those sensors and all those kind of things. But if a plane is crashed, those trucks are going as 72.5 miles an hour once they get up to it, and then they're going to slam on the brakes and start flowing water. How do you make sure that they know how to slam on brakes and flow water? Because there is anybody in ARF, and this is stuff you learn, you got to be under 1,500 RPMs. When you're at 3,500 running 70, you can't just flip the turret on and start flowing water, because it's just going to not get water. Well, then that goes back to, oh shit, what happens now, right? Like, oh, I can't get water, plane's burning, people are jumping out. Like, how do you simulate that piece to how do I challenge officers that have been on the fire department and firefighters that have been on the fire department longer than I have? And I think a lot of that time that you're talking about comes from watching companies. And man, call me whatever you want. I go watch my companies at training because I teach at our training academy. I'm super fortunate. One of my favorite parts of my journey through the fire service is I get to go, I'll be teaching recruits hose and nozzles. Yes, I go out and teach this, other places, but I get to teach in my own department, have an impact there. Well, I'm not going to come down to in-service the next day and you come up to me and go, hey man, your companies yesterday looked like crap, because they're going to say that, right? Mm-hmm. But if I'm standing there, not only is it, yeah, there's a little pressure, which is good, but I'm watching to go, okay, my companies need to work. I have, one ladder company I've got in the new battalion. I'll have one of our rescue companies. Like, what do I need them to get better at, right? Like they do a lot of in-service training on dive and ropes and all these things. but like, what do I need them to be better at? What do I need my ladder to be better at? Because everybody can improve. Well, how do I gain both time for me, right? Like you're talking about, how long does it take for my companies to stretch a line, make
Mm-hmm.
an impact on the fire? What does that look like in my head while I'm commanding a fire? But also, how do I make it better? Because it's about making it better, right? Like we always say, oh, I'm going to leave it better than I found it. Well, that's part of it. But like the person, and I just use this in the rescue survey thing, there are people that we deal with that have seconds. And if we don't shave off seconds, they may not make it out. And they may make it out and still die. But like Ben Schultz said in his presentation up there in Richmond that we were all a part of, I want to have the best impact, the best outcome from the time I get there. I want to create the best outcome possible. And if that means that I get 15 seconds better at mask up or stretching a line,
Mm-hmm.
but then as a chief, that I leave those companies to work so I don't distract the company officer, so he's not going, God dang it, what does the chief want? Go ahead, command. And then his head's gone from the mission, right? And I think some chiefs think, you forget that it's a push to talk and a release to listen, and they just think it's a one-way button. And you get into that, you get into that whole, command to this company, command to that company, command to this company. Man, shut up. Let the people, like, it's a 1,000 square foot house burning, and I'm guilty of that. And that's something that again, social awareness. I got to be better at that, and I think that's just that's part of my growth process, is to get better at that. Because some chiefs in our department, or any department, you listen to them here, and like your chief in your organization may be pretty hands off, but some of ours or somewhere else you listen, you may be like, Jesus, man, I'd punch that dude in the face when I got out. And we've all had that conversation around the firehouse, like, will he shut up? And I
Yeah,
think that's part of that, is trusting companies, seeing their reps to then give you a rep of what that looks like. If that makes that's
it,
how I'm relating that to that.
it does. You mentioned the Firefighter Rescue Survey. We've talked about it a couple times. I did not. Today is the first time that I've heard the busy season between December and February, and I want to come back. But what's the mindset of the for you, like what has your involvement been with the Firefighter Rescue Survey, and why, for those who might be listening to this and they've never heard of it, and they're living under a rock, but come out, it's all right. What's the why is this so critical to the fire service, and why does it, like, because I feel like this thing, as I'm reading through it, is driving my mindset even more to be a better deputy chief, to be a better firefighter. Because I always think of, even though I'm a chief, I'm still, like, I have an air pack and all my gear and tools in the car. If I come up first due to a house fire and there's somebody reported trapped, like, I feel like I have an obligation, especially if the company is not right there, or hell, I could just be driving home because I don't live in my fire district. I'm gonna,
Yep.
like, that six, like the Hyattsville standard when I rode in PG County, of like, you will be in your fully dressed within 60 seconds, encapsulated on air. Like, I hold myself to that standard because exactly what you just said. But how does a firefighter survey, rescue survey, impact this, and what's your involvement with it?
So man, I was out in Oklahoma teaching. Brian Brush has been a close friend of mine. We were laughing about it. I think it's been right around 14 years ago, we met at FDIC. You hear these stories of meeting people at FDIC. We met up through the Fire Service Warrior Group. I was out there teaching in Oklahoma, and we got to talking about it. I was trying to do some things in my own department, and he said, "Man, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna add you this Facebook message." Literally, I hate Facebook messages, group messages sometimes, because you're like, "Oh my God, just stop." And got added to it, started, and then I realized, like, I think Brian just made me a part of this, like, steering group. Like, for what? Like, who the hell am I? I'm a engine guy. I'm not a search guy. But got involved in, and since then, man, just been a small, super small part of it, because there are guys who've been making this push for, I think it was 15, 16 years ago is when the push really started. Um, and I got involved because I started talking to Justin Lorenzen from Oklahoma City, very similar size department, similar fire volume, all the things. And I was trying to do an internal rescue survey, so we could examine how we are doing it in Charlotte. How do we pull someone out? How do we find people? Where are we finding people? And I think that's a huge value. Well, Justin and I talked. Basically, we laughed about it because we did a kind of co-presentation at the. We did an Ambassadors Academy with the 350 line in Richmond this past week, and we were laughing because Justin's like, mine didn't crap compared to Jonah's, and I laughed. I was like, because I took everything you did and just made it better. Like I was like, hey, I can. He did that, so I can do this. And we laughed about it, but it's been kind of a group thing from the beginning. One thing I'd highly recommend, because it is super humbling, the popularity, but super beneficial to the organization, has been purchase the book of Search. You're not going to find better articles on Search by better people. It's anybody who's ever taught Search in the fire service, I feel like. Mike Lombardo's in, like, everybody. Corley Moore was kind enough to get it together through Amazon, and all the proceeds have gone to the rescue survey, and it will impact our reach in a very positive way. It'll help us do some things that we were able to sit down and talk about to make the data and the reach more impactful and beneficial to the citizens we serve. And that's not some freaking, mission statement we came up with this past week. It's facts. We're going to be able to make the data talk to you more than we are now.
One of my senior firefighters bought the book for the firehouse and wrote a nice note in it. Joe Tompkins said about, like, this is a gift to the fires. And I've been picking it up randomly and just opening it up and reading. And it's been phenomenal so far.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's free on PDF, too. If you just want to print it out and put it in the firehouse, you can. But the benefit of purchasing the book is, some of us old people do like the tactile feel of reading a book, because I got the PDF when it came out and started reading. I'm like, I'm going to have to buy the book. So I'm getting the book. But I think that the Firefighter Rescue Survey, the forethought that the firefighters, and I'm not going to say a couple names because I'll miss somebody, from the original group, and I do not want to do that, because you can go to the website and talk to some people and figure out who has really done it. And some of those folks have since stepped away because their lives got busy. Some are still involved, and everybody has their role. It's kind of funny. I've been able to present it, a kind of a pitch, but a class on it within the Center for Public Safety Excellence. And we laugh because Justin McWilliams is part of the group. Justin is a fantastic instructor, but he's not the guy you want to take to the chief's office with you, right? Like, I don't need a guy shirtless. I don't need Justin McWilliams throwing his flannel shirt, standing on tables like the first time I saw him teach. But man, it got me pumped up. But my fire chief would be like, "Who is this dude?" and get him out of my office. So we each kind of play a role in that, and I think that's important. Is that we're all different people. I mean, we have. I think one of the most impactful presentations was the nerdiest one this past week, which was the data folks. Jason and Katie, two of our data folks who, Jason has a background in IT from prior to the fire service. Katie's a volunteer firefighter, and she graduated from Stanford with a bachelor's, and I believe she got her master's there as well. So I don't know a lot of really non-intelligent people that go to Stanford. So
Right.
Super nerdy stuff, but how they validate data and what does reporting bias look like? Because it's just like Facebook, your algorithm, like you and I are friends. I see some of your stuff because we're eat up with the fire service, but the guy who's not eat up is looking at lawn equipment, sitting across from you at the table. And I think just the impact of what the Firefighter Rescue Survey has brought to the forefront, bringing our mission back to the forefront. There's information that is currently being tabulated that I think will even have more of an impact to show how much of an impact firefighters have on fires with trapped civilians. I can think of nothing no more important than getting a person who's trapped in a fire out. CPR is part of our mission, all those things, but there is one entity that was formed to stop conflagrations and people from dying in fires, and it's the fire department. And I think that we're safer than we've ever been. I think risk management, not risk aversion, is the way to go, and I think Bill Carey speaks to that. I'll say ad nauseum, but I could listen to it all day. About, and I think he said at Richmond, we're more dangerous. More people are killed getting there than are killed on the fire ground. And I think that the more we get that narrative straight, I'm not saying push that narrative, because it's not a push narrative. It's literally get it straight that we're not all dying because we're not putting out fires and walls and ceilings are falling on us. That is going to happen, but calculated risk, and it goes back to reps and training, recognition, prime decision making, right? Putting you on the stopwatch so that you're under pressure, masking up, all those things, so that you can get in and look at that. Because to go back to it and how it came up first in our conversation, people have seconds to live at times. And if I can study those seconds, masking up faster, what room am I going to search, recognizing survivable areas. That's a huge part of what Oklahoma City and Midwest City have really pushed is, yes, you might have full involvement of this 50% of this house, but what's over here? Is this survivable space? What's the layout of the space? What's my, and I loved Brian's way of presenting this up there. He talked about statistics and analytics. Where do we use analytics in our lives? I'm gonna ask you a question. Where do you see that? And not in your life around your house.
Maybe analytics for me, like the easiest place to put it would be social media. I see the analytics of like where the reach is. I mean, I did whether it's a post for National Fire Radio, a post for Frontline Mindset, or a post for I was shoveling my driveway the other day, because we get snow here, and then you have to clear it from the driveway.
Ours just melts in like an hour later.
Yeah, but like it was a heavy, wet snow, and I took a break, and I said, you know what? I'm gonna shoot a quick video for the fire department as deputy chief, and I just did a couple like, hey, these are some tips about take a break, like give yourself 10 minutes, hydrate. If you experience any kind of shortness of breath or sharp chest pain, stop immediately and call 911. We'll be here. Like a simple and. I looked at the analytics for that, and I got like 500 views within a couple hours. And I was, and I looked, and it was hitting the people who follow us, which are primarily our residents and people surrounding Fairview. So like, I was happy with those analytics because I know I got a safety message out that was completely impromptu, by the way. Like I was just shoveling the driveway, and my fat ass was a little winded. So while the dogs were running around playing in the snow, I did this quick video. But that's how I use analytics,
Well, and I think what Brian talked about too is, Facebook's a big one, but think about pro sports. And I watched it last night. Like Brian said, think about Moneyball. If you've ever watched Moneyball, I'm a huge baseball guy. Moneyball changed the way Major League Baseball teams, like that guy for the Athletics, changed the way people looked at baseball. And then it's bled over football. Like last night, it was 4th and 3. The Vikings went for it and said, analytics really like a field goal here. They were down 10-0, 4th and 3, and they were on like the 20-something or 30-something yard line. And I guarantee you that, and that's where people are like, well, then you're taking the coach out of the game. And as Brian explained it, and he couldn't explain it better, that's why I kind of quote him. He was talking about, analytics give the coach a better decision-making process. No different than the BC. Like my experience, your experience as a chief may drive a tactic. But what we need to look is at the analytics, like if we VES a window and bring them back out that window, and what's our likelihood of finding someone? What's their likelihood of survival? And then what medical pieces can we do to increase that? That is what the Firefighter Rescue Surveys brought because, and Brian used an example of, I think it was Yale. There was a group of nerds. I know that's hard to believe in an Ivy League school, nerds, but that studied sports analytics in like 2000, I want to say it was 15, if I remember his slide right. And they did it, and that's where kind of the Patriots started using it because it was like, wait, what they're saying is right. And it was basically, if I have a 4th and 2, 80% of the time with a high right, dragging left, 32 reverse, I'm going to get 2 yards. So I'll get the first down, but then 89% of the time I'm going to get the first down, and 89% of the time I'm going to, or say 70% of the time on that play I get 2 yards. Well, then you go back and you go, well, 50% of the time, I'm going to get 50 yards if I run this play in this situation. And just, it's super nerdy, but man, everything we do is analytics. And when you're like Brian said, when you've got a coach who's making millions of dollars to coach a football team or to coach, to manage a baseball team, and they in their back pocket's a nerd, not like you or I, because they're way higher level, but a nerd going, hey, it's 4th and 3. In this situation in the game, these are the 2 plays I'd run, and he's or the guys on the headset, or it's on their sheet, right, that says 80% of the time, 4th and short, you're going to get 2 yards. But if it's 4th and 3, 90% of the time you can run a quarterback, because like the quarterback sneak is the most reliable play for a short yardage situation. But how many people go for a screen pass? Well, that's where the coach goes, nah, man, screw those analytics. We're going to do this. And guess what? Last night I watched it. 4th and 3, analytics really like a field goal here. What does he do? Throws an interception. And it didn't make a difference, right? It's a 2-yard punt is all it was. But again, that's analytics, man. And that's the fire service We look at response time fractals. We look at percentage involvement. We look at all these things. The Firefighter Rescue Survey gives you those high target areas, the high removal areas, and then we can, if you really want to get down in your training, you could talk about, like, okay, if I VES a window when there's smoke showing, and it turns into this if-then type, word problem, and people are like, well, I ain't worried about that. Well, let's worry about, is it faster when UL gives you the information? And I don't know if it's 2 or 3 times, but if I remove somebody's airway lower and slower, it's better than higher and faster. That data should strike every fire service member in the country, because we all pick people up and we just got to get them out of there. Facts. Right. However, lower and slower is 3 times more likely for them to survive than higher and faster. They're leveling the airway, and all that is huge. And man, would we even be talking about this if we didn't have UL in the Firefighter Rescue Survey? Nope. We'd be reading Jones and Bartlett or IFSTA manuals saying, remove the victim as quickly as possible from the toxic environment. Well, yeah, but
no shit.
Yeah, but again, you go back to the damn Waffle House cook who doesn't know crap about the fire service, and you're bringing him in, and he goes, well, I just got to get him out. And when I took my CPAT, this is how I drugged the person. I did pretty good. No, man, you're killing people. Like, survivability is higher, area of involvement, all those things. And the Firefighter Rescue Survey, I mean, again, I'm like that big in it, but the group, the folks who've really pushed this, and I know Brian was a big part of that, but Brian brought it to the forefront. Those guys had done the legwork to come up with the survey and the reason for it, and already started running analytics. Well, now, it's man, I'm telling you, UL and Nearest, and we're talking to all of them, and it's a multi-pronged approach. And for us in Charlotte, man, another month or two, we'll be able, I'm sure you will see some stuff on our data analytics, because there's really good information that we can use in our recruit school to say, in Charlotte, we do this. This is how we find people. This is how they survive.
So you've already talked about 1 or 2 trends or takeaways that the data has changed. So what else has it changed in your approach, like looking into this? Like you just said, like like picking up and going high versus going low and slow. What are some other things that you have kind of takeaways in the mindset of this?
Well, in Charlotte, and I think the newest 4,000 data shows medication. Medical interventions following the removal have been very interesting. And for us, and I equate it to, what do you have on an engine company in your jurisdiction that you've forgotten you have? Something, right? Whether it's the triple tapping kit for the hide, or whatever you've got, right? The left-handed smoke shifter you carry in the engineer's compartment, whatever it is. Our paramedics in our county, in Mecklenburg County, we're not using the sodium thiosulfate, which is basically a knockoff or a generic cyanokit. It has some advantages to it, which is why we went to it. It was brought about by a battalion chief in my organization, who's the fire chief at a volunteer organization where they had a line of duty death in our county. Richard Shelter passed away. They found it was from hydrogen cyanide poisoning, and Mike Guerin went out, and he works with the NFFF doing some stuff, and he hammered our medical director, used some really good relationships he had to justify why we should carry this on every ambulance in Mecklenburg County, not only for firefighters, but for citizens. And since we started our own internal survey, Medic figured out, their paramedics are forgetting it's on the ambulance. They're not giving it when the indication's needed. And now, man, we're doing it on CO calls. Like, Medic is giving this drug where it's indicated more often than they ever have. So that's been really good, because, again, did I think that we were going to be helping Medic with pushing drugs, like adding victim survivability with medical interventions in Mecklenburg County by doing the fire? I thought we were going to start doing cool search stuff, and that was like the first thing that happened. The other thing is, I think there's going to be some public education and public information stuff come out of ours, just because of we have some concentrated areas where we have fires and some particular fire hazards that we're noticing that we would have never noticed had we not had this data. We're going to have a dashboard where you can pull it up in the fire station and go, hey, wonder how many rescues we've had this year. Click and do it. And there'll be some really, really good stuff for, it's going to bring the mission of getting people out of burning fires back to the forefront. I think we're, like the engine renaissance, right? Like there's been a
Yeah.
huge growth in engine ops. All those things in the fire service have been really good for the victim, for the people who are trying to save, right? And I think that's UL, and they've only scratched the surface, right? They're all their stuff right now has been in 1-story buildings. Like we hadn't even gotten to a 2 or 3-story building yet.
Right.
Like so, think about what we're going to learn about
Garden
excuse
style
me,
apartments or mid
victims
rises. I mean,
victims in a 2-story house that are above the fire. Like, what does that look like? Like, is it better to bring them down the stairs? Is it better to bring them up the hallways? Is it better to go remote and protect them? Like, all those answers are still kind of. We're using the rescue survey to look at some of that, but now we can have temperature data and all the stuff and things, right?
I,
Go ahead.
this is I feel like I'm asking a stupid question here, um, but I've actually wondered this just from the standpoint of if I'm on a fast team or a RIT team, I have a RIT pack. Like there's in the back of my head, I have thought about like it's like we've never put the RIT pack as on the search team. Like if I
So,
find a victim, like because and I think of Nick Martin did a fire engineering thing on if I find a firefighter with the mask off, and like it completely changed my mindset about RIT and how that RIT pack works. And like assuming the mask is broken, assuming he's out of air, like he probably took it off for a reason, and then like to put that mask on the down firefighter and the hit the regulator piece to get air flowing if you're using a Scott, right? Or push the front and to roll it on. Like, how come I'm not doing that for the citizens if I'm find one that's in? I mean, because like, and I've never gone beyond the fact of like being like, all right, well, it's for us, like. Well, I've already I'm entering the environment with an STBA. Why don't I have this device that I could bring potentially for, and I've never explored the rabbit hole.
well, I think that question came up last week in Richmond. We had a Q&A every day, and I missed the second one, but the first one, that was one of the questions. And I think the room of 250 people plus the 5 or 6 of us up front felt that it depends on your organization, right? And
Yeah,
I think all of us in the front of the room said, "I'll take the write up." If the fire chief came to me and said, "Why'd you do that?" and I could justify it and maintain my RIT presence, right? Because I think that's I think it's important, but not overly important over top of the person we know is trapped in the building. All those things. Um, but I feel confident. I made the statement to one of the students. I said that's why I keep enough money to get 2 days off of my savings account too, because you may make the decision that you painted the fire chief, my boss, whoever. Your captain in a corner where they have to. Okay, policy says you can't do that, so you can't do that, but it's the right thing. And
yeah,
that's always a question on an assessment center, right? What policy would you break that you don't agree with? And the go-to in our organization is always the lockout policy, right? It's 115 degrees outside because you might get snow, but you'll soil your underwear with sweat down here by 7 a.m. in the morning some days. You go to a kid trapped in a car that's non-responsive and not sweating, and it's 100 more degrees, and the mom says he's been in there 20 minutes. Our policy clearly states you must have the signed form prior to making access to the car. What are you going to do? You're going to break the window.
break the
She
window.
sues the fire department. I'll take the hit. A couple days off. I violated policy. Yes, sir. And I'll go off into the sunset. So I know it's been discussed in my organization in formal training about a larger victim that we are sheltering in place. That, if it's Big Mama in her moo that we might have to
Yeah,
shelter in place and bring the RIT bag. But my organization is different, right? I've got 60 companies. I've got plenty of RIT bags. Like I
well,
can
it's like
grab a RIT bag off the first due engine. Now, if you're in a department where it's the only RIT bag, I still would say we do some things, but I'm not your chief and I'm not your boss, so I can't dictate policy for other organizations. But I think that so long as you're not taking away that safety factor in some way, right? I mean, we've got, like I said, at any given fire, we're going to have 6 RIT bags sitting there. We can surely spare one for that person that we're sheltering in place, trying to save their life. And so, again, I think that was kind of the answer we all gave. Like, if you're in a
yeah.
rural volunteer fire department, it's the only RIT bag, and it's a very hazardous environment. Like, that's a split-second decision that you might be told you're wrong, but it still might be the right thing to do. So,
And just like I'm thinking about it right now. Just I'm running down my first alarm assignment. or when I have a working fire, I'm pretty sure that once because of the small nature of my department, I pull a hook pretty quickly. Um, I'm going to get 4 RIT packs within 10 minutes. Like,
Yep.
I'm going to bring 2 of them myself, and I'm not the RIT team. I'm the initial attack and search team. So it just, like, this is something that I just, I said, I'm sorry we went down this rabbit hole here, but like, it's
Yep.
just, as you're talking about this, I'm like, all right, like, why don't we protect the airway if we have the capability to, and we're the initial company.
Yep.
So off track there a little bit. Sorry. Has the rescue survey changed your perspective as an officer or an instructor?
Absolutely.
And how so?
So I'm a big engine guy. One of my passions, and I kind of feel like I've described, I submitted an article to a publication recently that was accepted and will be published at some point, but on the nozzleman's mindset when it comes to victims. We've got it all wrong, but yet we're saving. When fire attack finds somebody, there's a 60% survival. If I ask you, how were you told to address a victim, you would tell me, I was told to get them out, because we don't do a lot of training with search teams and nozzle teams. We do a primary search drill, and we don't have you're finding people in hallways. The nozzle's traveling that hallway. They're going to jam it up. As we try to reposition the victim, I always say, like, I'm not a guy who sells snake oil. You find a victim, you don't know if that victim's Jonah Smith or if that victim's Big Mama. And I go back to, I think it was Stevie Wonder or Ray Charles, who judged women by, he judged them by their wrists, right? Like, we joke about it, but until you grab that ankle or that wrist, you have no idea. If you find something soft and you see it, you don't know if that's going to be a victim you can get out in 20 seconds or 20 minutes. You don't know. And so fire service doesn't deal in absolutes, but I can tell you absolutely that nozzle needs to keep flowing to clear and cool the environment, as UL's proven. Also, if I drag the victim and something gets hung or something goes awry, UL's proven that heat rebound happens within 45 seconds. Well, if I'm trying to reposition somebody in a hallway in 45 seconds, how often are you going to be able to do that? And then on top of that, if they get hung up, where are they getting hung up? Because if you're going over top of your nozzle, where's the nozzle going to end up? Right under the victim. I mean, Murphy's Law. Murphy's going to show up and put the victim right under it. And Cobb County actually had a similar incident where they, it was a UL video they did where the nozzleman abandoned the nozzle, and then they got caught in a really, really bad spot and had to call it Mayday because they couldn't get to the nozzle because it was so bad. We've had that experience within our department, maybe not to the Cobb County level, but to a heat level where it got very uncomfortable and people were like running up to get the nozzle. We had another one where we had a Mayday, had the nozzleman not operated the nozzle because of, again, rat brain. He opened hot, I'm going to cool. We would have probably lost a firefighter, or at least they would have gone to the burn center instead of going to the ER and going home. So that's kind of been my mindset change with it is, as an engine guy, I'm thinking about the victim and the nozzle. Because that happens 24 to, depending on what data set you look at, quarter of the time, the engine's going to, if it's a fire in a building and I'm going to go through a hallway, I'm going to go through the living room, and I'm going to go through the common area, 6 feet of the door, like the engine may encounter it. Okay. So that's a big piece. I think training where you have victims going over top of lines, because that is what is going to happen at a fire, right? I think that's a huge training gap that I believe we may be addressing our next in-service here at work, because we had some pretty good discussions about it amongst the instructors. And we've got a great crew at our training academy right now that's really, the last fire we had was a commercial fire, and it went just like training. The engine went in with a 2.5, the ladder went ahead and searched, and it was all because that's been programmed in. That's how it works. I think that's going to be a portion of ours, is a search with, there's no fire I've been in where the search team has no nozzle around them at all. Like, right. They may be ahead of it, right? But at some point, they're going to come through the same hole or have to address the flow of water. But be on their little cans, their cute little water can, right? Because it's like,
you are a fucking engine guy.
I told Eric Wheaton one time, I said, I'm pretty confident the can ain't put out no fire all the way that I've ever been to. He started laughing. I said, I don't need no can confidence. I ain't got confidence in crap. And No, but if they're going to control the fire, either way, they're having to address the water flow out of an 1 3/4 in an interior fire, and bringing that victim through what that looks like. Right? You can clamp slide and freaking straight stick lines all you want, but until you've had a victim in a narrow hallway while all that's going on, it's not real to me.
Right.
And I think the fire service, we're getting better at addressing that, and that's been because, like, I mean, and Justin Lorenz and I talk about it. Even in my department, 1/4 of the victims are found by people on lines. Like, how did they react? Well, fortunately, in my department, for the most part, we've had enough people that they didn't really have to do much. One of the fires caused a mayday, though, because the engine guy, the nozzleman, did what he was supposed to do. He kept flowing water and turned around and was like, "Hey, feed me some line," and it all unfolded so quick. He's like, hey guys, hello," and all his friends were gone because they were taking the victim out. So I think that that's a piece we're addressing better because of the rescue survey. And my mindset in training is presenting, and it should be everybody's goal, presenting realistic situations that aren't far-fetched, that the stress is enough where I don't have to yell or play loud music. The figuring out how to move a victim with a nozzleman operating is enough, because there's a lot of stuff going on. And again, with the nozzleman operating, you know, the truck goes ahead, finds the person in the bedroom. How do they, if they say, "Hey, we're going to the door," like the communication piece, like, you can't just, that's why I teach all nozzle firefighters. You flow water high because people should be low. And if they're not low and you hit them in the face because you're flowing at an angle, that's on them, man. Like, but if I'm flowing down the hallway and the truck's ahead of me, I'm going to hit somebody in the chest, even if they're crawling.
Right.
And I'm not going to see it if I'm standing up, because I'm going to be above the plane of what I can probably see. So why not get where victims are, get where the cooling happens, get the environment to lift, because the lift, when they say lift, it doesn't start up here and drop down. It starts down low, so the better visibility is always going to be low. I can get that. Truck comes low. Even if they're coming high with a victim, they're getting spackled instead of nailed. And I think that that's again, that piece is, I mean, over the past 2-3 years, that's been a huge thing I've tried to pass on to students and in my own organization, my battalion, everything else, because I think that's a piece we've never talked about. 23 years in the fire service almost, never heard somebody talk about what we do when we find a victim and we're on the nozzle. Well, you shut it off and you go. Okay, man, that works until the person's 300 pounds and they're under the door frame. Like,
or
they're
their
hung up
skin's
around the door
lopping
frame.
off, you know, like any of the other victim
No
removal
one
techniques.
ever dies with clothes on. We know that. I mean, it's a joke in the fire service, right?
Yeah.
Nobody dies with clothes on. And think about, and I mean, I don't want to think about what some people sleep in, but most people are wearing a minimal amount of clothes if they do sleep. Well, if they're awake, they probably got out. If they're asleep or incapacitated, they're probably wearing pajama pants and no shirt, or a short sleeve shirt. So this training with firefighters in turnout gear, and I can tell you it sucks wearing normal clothes and getting drugged, but how does a real person bend versus Rescue Randy?
Right.
And we did that in our in-service training 3 years ago. We had an acquired school, and we were trying to teach scanning with the tick down the hallway. It was basically simulating a center hallway apartment. And I laid at the end in a chore coat and my chief's pants. And you would not believe how much, and I'm right at 200 pounds, how much I whipped people's ass on a straight linoleum floor with a couple chairs in the way. That was it. One person tried to flip me over, ripped my jacket off, then got the search rope wrapped around my arm to the point I said, "You got to stop. My arm's getting ripped off." And it drove home a lot of points with people to go, shit, we're always used to cheating with turnout gear. No, I'm not. I wasn't even slick. I'm just fat.
Yeah.
So I think that's another piece people got to think about is, yes, you can't go to a live burn and put a live victim. Can I use theatrical smoke to get that feel of very little visibility, and then dragging a real person using, and it sucks. I can tell you, I got my ass beat. My calves were hurting for weeks, but at the same point, like, I'm getting paid by the community college to teach. Like, if I lay on the floor and get drugged, it's really not hard work. It hurts, but
yeah.
So,
all right. So we've been going for about an hour and 40 minutes here,
mm-hmm.
and I'm like, what if we've talked about a lot on the Firefighter Rescue Survey? Is there anything that you want to just finish up on or that we didn't hit that, like in the questions that I've asked here, that's important? Because I know
I
like
think
this is I really believe in the firefighter survey, and I want to give it, like I said, if there's a point that I want to make sure we're addressing it.
I think that it's important to understand that the data is not just a bunch of firefighters plugging in crap. It's as valid and reliable, if not more, than NIFRS is. It is as valid, if not more reliable, than Project Mayday and NFPA stuff. I can tell you that from just the way we do it, the way that things are quality controlled with our data team, and we also have numerous departments, my own included, that have a policy in place. There were 11 in California yesterday where they are required to put it in per policy. So and what I'd say from an internal perspective, Justin Lorenz and I spoke to this the other day. Our data that we're finding in our own departments, in the majority, and I'm talking vast majority of the categories that we analyze in the national, are identical. And if that doesn't show validity and reliability, if you're a statistics person, I mean, we're a small sample size. We're at 60 and change since we started tracking. I think Oklahoma's right around 80 or 100. But you're talking basically 200 rescues that are showing the same data as the national. And there's some other interferences there with, some of the size of department, response times, all those kind of things. But I think just to understand the data is not just a bunch of dumbass firemen plugging some stuff in an Excel spreadsheet. It actually is respected and I mean, it's QA, QI'd, and as well as, man, UL has partnered with us, and I don't know any firefighter that is paying attention to the fire service that would be like, oh, UL's a bunch of bullcrap. Like,
right.
We're literally, I mean, Brian and some of the higher ups, I'll say, they're not higher ups, but the higher ups will give Brian a hard time. Nick and Brian and Katie and Jason are talking actively to Steve Kerber and UL about statistics and how to test some of those things in a lab environment, not test they've done in a lab environment, how it fits into us. They're trying to figure out why things happen the way they happen from our statistics. So I think that's a huge piece. And I mean, the data's free. Just the numbers thing is great. It's 8 or 10 pages of nerd stuff. You got graphs. It's all out there for everybody. The graphs, you can pull them off. You don't even got to reformat them. Don't use them as your own, but pull it off the website, put it in your PowerPoint presentation in your recruit class. That's what it's about. It's about, and I think that's the cool part of the group, is it's not about notoriety or fame for any of those folks. It's literally about making an impact on the people that are trapped in a building on fire. That's it. That's all it's about. It's not about, Nick Ledeen getting a book deal or Brian Brush being in a command book. It's not about that. It's about making the impact to the 3-year-old girl in South Carolina that's caught in her house, and that fire department has every piece of information and skill set that they could have developed prior to that incident to get her out. That's what it's about.
The one thing for the survey, and I did this a while ago, and I probably should do it again, and actually I'm going to write it down, survey. On its most basic level, the survey, because the drama of the small department. Well, we don't make grabs. Well, I always get offended at that one because I made 2 with Ryan Keefe. And we've had some fatal fires, so that's a victim that we didn't get to in time, right? But it showed the area, like the Hudson Valley, that we were actually very active in, because we're all these individual departments, but it painted a picture for my crews at the time that, hey, this is legit. It's not just us, it's our area. Our area is seeing this many grabs, this many saves that we got. We've found these people in burning buildings and removed them. And when you start looking at it on I don't want to say a more global, but a more regional level like that, it opened up the eyes of oh wow, this is a common occurrence. This is not just something that randomly happens that we hear about once in a blue moon that we pop champagne for. It's happening all the time, and it's happening within 60 miles of us.
And in our department, man, we didn't even know we'd have 60, 70 data points in 3 years.
Right.
I mean, think about all the grabs that we missed in just my department. Yes, we're big, but COVID really showed us all that everybody makes these grabs, and that we're tracking what uses resources too, because then it drives a staffing piece. Then it drives a response piece. Then it drives a command piece, a command mindset. There's so many things you can drive using just the national data within your own organization. I think that's a big positive of it. So,
Hornet Fire Training. You have a company. Can we talk about it real quick?
Yeah. So in 2017-ish, Brian Brush came to town. I keep mentioning Brian. He's one of my dear friends, and he basically yelled at me and said, "What are you doing? Why don't you start a company? I'm tired of you promoting all your stuff on your Facebook page, and you're probably taking heat for work at it." And I was, and it was about protecting my family, right? If I do something stupid on the training ground, I want to have a place where my family and kids can still live. So formed the LLC. It also was a branding thing, like I think everybody else in the fire service does. But man, it's taken me to places I never thought I'd be, audiences I never thought I'd speak in front of, people I never thought I'd sit on a stage with, all those things. But started it, and it's mine, right? I called it Hornet Fire Training. That was the hardest part, is coming up with a name, because everybody's got a name, box alarm training, whatever. Hornet Fire Training came from the Charlotte area. Was called the Hornet's Nest of Resistance during the Revolutionary War by General Cornwallis. So it's cool. Knew a guy who drew up a logo. The 11 on my helmet is the first fire station I was assigned to in Columbia, because I think it's important to remember that. I also, when I was in Richmond and they let me ride along, I was a glorified ride along called an intern. I was at Station 11, so that's kind of where I got my start in the fire service. Of course, he's got a nozzle and a Halligan bar, because that's what every good engine firefighter carries. But since then, I've been able to branch out and give. I think I was telling one of the folks at FDIC this year that one of the coolest parts of doing Hornet Fire Training has been giving people a voice that pretty much don't have the nuts or desire. There's two different kinds that I deal with, to go out and be the face of something. In other words, being a lead instructor in a class. And I've got quite a few folks, man, they got a better message than I do. I got one. He's one of my mentors. He recently retired. Who I laugh. I was like, I don't even need to be here. Like, this is my company, but he's the guy. And because he taught me a lot about what we're talking about. But I think that's been one of the coolest parts, is to give people from my area a voice and an opportunity to experience what you and I both do, and plenty of people watching this that have gotten to teach in their area and region. I have been super fortunate. A lot of folks that teach at FDIC, right? They go all over the country, and they don't do a lot in their area, right? Because you're never a prophet in your own hometown. I still feel that, right? But I have also been super fortunate with my company to have a very large impact on departments in my region. The town 15 minutes south of here had me come in, and me and another guy did a high-rise class, because they don't have a lot of high-rises. And, couple guys doing truck stuff, couple guys doing this, and now it's kind of turning into a company. But the thing I value and my folks value is just impact on the department, right? We don't want to sell you snake oil that you're not going to use. And that's kind of been our strength as a group, has been, every one of my folks has volunteered in some way, shape, or form. Every one of them is respected in their organization, and, they represent, and you hate to say brand because it feels so businessy, but it is. And I've been super fortunate to be a part of that. And again, great thing, because now I got a Facebook page. I can promo my stuff. If you want to see my kids playing soccer and stuff, every now and then I'll share something from Hornet. But again, to drive some statistics and analytics, right? But some of that is, I can also separate my social media from business to family, and so done that. And we do a variety of classes, some leadership stuff, engine company. Branching out to the truck company, got some partners with that are super knowledgeable in it, and a market that I never thought I would be in or involved in. That's been actually one of the more fun ones, has been coming into smaller departments, and not necessarily one or two station, but sizable departments, a couple of them, and doing an in-service program and changing their engine culture or their truck culture or their surge culture. Using, the instructors were down to earth, hang out. Couple departments, we go eat at the firehouse because we don't want to go spend a bunch of money on overpriced pizza, and really have those conversations with people, and it's helpful to the departments, right? A couple of them are like, man, our officers usually had to set up our training. Now you come in, do it, and we're done, and our officers are getting developed. So it's been a journey, that's for sure, but been really cool too.
What since 2017, um, as far as like like between this FDIC, other conferences, what kind of common challenges or mindset gaps do you see in today's firefighters as an
I,
instructor?
well, I think a lot of it's not understanding context. I think
Okay.
context is lost. I think,
Yeah.
and that's something I, as an instructor, try to derive. I think, and I mean, hell, little known fact, I teach EMS in my department for recruits and some of that, and I have that discussion every time. Like, I'm not the guy to teach the context of EMS. I'm the guy who's the hands-on guy. But engine
Mm-hmm.
company operations, the context is it's super hard to build. The context of search, why do we do what we do when we do it? And a lot of people go, oh, you look at the senior guy and he's like, oh, and you look at the chief and he goes, oh, and then all of a sudden it's this discussion of, and my organization, we're slamming people through the pipeline so fast because
Right.
we're hiring, man, we are super fortunate. It's a great problem to have. We're adding multiple companies, a new battalion, new captains, like all these things that people dream of. And one of the problems is we are pumping recruits and officers out the pipeline, and sometimes then that breeds some inexperience and failure of context. But our recruit training program, that's been a passion of a lot of the instructors, is to give, why do we high shoulder ground ladder throw? Why do we gap the door before we force it? Why do we not always use the strong arm because it's the easy thing, or the hydro ram? Why, in auto extrication, do you look at the integrity of the car before you start cutting the roof off because you may need the roof? Like, all those things are challenging, and I think that a lot of firefighters, especially when you go to some fire academies, right, that it's just a puppy mill of firefighters,
Right.
right? Like, just pump them out, pump them out, pump them out because we got to get the next class in. I think sometimes that's lost, and I think then when you have very little experience in some of those same organizations, right? Because maybe it's a rural fire academy and they're pumping people out and it's a 6 week academy. Firefighter, you take the Waffle House cook to being a firefighter in 6 weeks. They have no idea what's going on. They're still trying to figure out how to take a blood pressure from week 2. Week
Right.
4, you're talking about sprinkler systems. They don't know what the hell they're doing. And we've all been there, but the difference was you get more time for context when it's not that quick. Well, you still struggle with that in our academy of 6 months. I think that's something that even students at a higher level, that you or I, we go to a conference, right? Conference is higher level training than, it's optional, but advanced training, I would say. And a lot of those people are like, oh, I just stand up because we always walk into fires. I'm like, dude, I walk into every fire. But when I get to the point I'm flowing water, I get down, flow water, stand back up. I said, it's getting harder as I get older. But
Yeah.
like, and they're like, why? And you explain it and they're like, yeah, the fire I went to, it was a shit show because I was standing up. The truck company came up. I sprayed one of them. And you're like, yeah, this is why. Why do you why do you guys search on the ground? Well, don't search on the ground if you don't have to. Shit, I can clear a house in 10 seconds. I can clear my whole house right now on the first floor in 5-10 seconds because it's 100% visibility. You don't have to clamp slide the line in the front door. Like, I get that, but I'm
Right.
like, oh, my instructor taught us the clamp slide, and that's how we move stuff. And bro, that's when you have to. Like, we're not going to teach you how to walk into a damn fire. We're going to teach you how to do the worst case you're going to do. And
Right.
I think that some instructor, and I think the internet drove some of that, right? You see Aaron Fields teaching the clamp slide, and immediately somebody in the firehouse is bought in, and immediately somebody is like, I ain't doing that shit. When the two meet is when you have, and this happened in Lancaster. I'll use the name, the town just south of me. We did an engine class, and they were having a huge argument about the triple fold versus the Minuteman.
Mm.
And when I went out there and pulled the triple fold as fast as I could pull a Minuteman, it just took more movements, and then pulled the Minuteman and said, this is why this is better. All the old guys went, just because these damn young guys watch on YouTube. And it was this whole like venting about the young guy conversation, and they were
Right.
100% right. And guess what they run now? They run the Minuteman, and it was because me and the other instructor that went down there gave a context
Right.
and breadth of knowledge versus I saw Aaron Fields do it because Aaron
Right.
Fields, I don't know if you've ever taken nozzle forward. I have quite a few times. He doesn't talk about the triple fold. He talks about how it sucks because if you've ever been to the class, you got 37 hours somehow built into 2 days, and you eat and sleep at some point. But you got 2 full days of advancements and stretching, and so they don't touch on that. Well, that context of, well, I ran the triple fold in my department, and then show them how I can do it, but I still like this. Not, well, that shit sucks. Let's do this. I think that's something that
Yeah.
lacks both in instructors and in, you know, like Kyle Romagus, big guy on the flat load, right? I could probably pull the flat load like he does. I don't like it as much, but because you study it and you take time, you don't just form a Facebook page and now you're teaching, because then that breeds into the young guy who's listening to, you know, Jim, John, and Bill training company, who's got 4.5 years and they just want to go out on the road because they want to be the guy, right? I think
Yeah.
what gets missed in instruction, both in the basic level and the advanced level. And you got a lot of instructors that are teaching all that together, but I think that's what's missing.
Um, where's my one? Actually, it's yeah. My I'm going to say this is my last question here, unless you got well, first off, before I go to my last questions, anything that you want to hit on that we missed?
No,
Okay.
I think we're good. I think we've talked about enough.
Yeah, yeah. What's your what's the first thing that you think of when someone says aggressive firefighting?
The salty dude with this salty guy walking in the and I won't say his name, but it's one of my captains in my new battalion. When I think of aggressive firemen, because this individual, we had a fire when I was a relief captain. He was a firefighter at the time, and I'll never forget. I mean, it is burning like hell. I mean, it's a garage, a detached garage, fire through the roof on the second floor, dripping stuff on a car that's under it. It's exposing the house. Like, you can see the siding. When we pulled up, you can see the siding smoking, not off-gassing, like actual fire developing in the
Right.
house. And he looks at me as he's buckling his waist straps and he gets off the truck. He said, "Hey, Jonah, you want a 2.5 or 1.75 inch?" And I said, "Let's go 1.75 inch. I'm going to get a 2.5 on the house." And he goes, "All right." And he gone. And it's that deliberate, you know, because aggressive can be a bad word in some ways, but it's
Right.
the deliberate, disciplined action of a firefighter to put a. And I teach safety in our thing, and one of my big things is safety is not risk aversion; it's risk management. You heard me say that earlier. I
Yeah.
think it's somebody who manages risk in their head, and firefighters who are aggressive, like, I don't manage crap. Yes, you do.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
looking at, I can put a line there and cut it off there, and it's going to be good for me to put it there, or do I go here because it's faster? Like, that is inherently risk management, right? And I think that is a portion of an aggressive firefighter, is deliberate, disciplined action to put out fires, right? Whether it is, and that comes with trust, right? Because you got some people. I think one of our chiefs said a long time ago, I don't condone freelancing, but like he said, well coordinated freelancing has put out many fires in the Charlotte Fire Department. And hey, you can't condone it, but there's always that guy who's like, "Hey, chief, I'm gonna go over here and do this." And you're like, "Yeah, why the hell didn't go do that? Yeah, now
Yeah.
go. Why aren't you already doing it?"
Or
You know,
the report. We've stretched a line here, and we're oh,
well,
okay.
and I'll say that, like, one of the last apartment fires I went to, as I was second due chief, and I got around the seaside, and there was a lot going on, and there was just a lot going on, and the chief was task saturated. We just pulled a victim out of side A, and I said, "Battalion 8 to command." He said, "Go ahead." I said, "Battalion 8, if you're good with it, I'm gonna go ahead and take Division C. I'll get these 4 companies that are back here if you're good with that." Knowing, because that's what I wanted to do, that, and knowing it needed to be done is what an aggressive firefighter does in my mind.
Right.
The truck company pulls up, says, you know, tower, whatever, to command. Go ahead. Hey, unless you got an assignment, otherwise we're going to the roof for you. And you go, "Yep." You know, I think, but again, it's deliberate and disciplined. It's not just kicking in the front door with your damn waist straps undone and freaking spraying the nozzle. And, you know, I always say in my engine classes, like, it's deliberate action. If I put the line in front of the door and I put the nozzle and the coupling there, that's a deliberate action. I don't ever move them from there because I put them there. And that's where I want it. When I spray water, I want it to go exactly where I'm spraying it, because it's a painting. It's a work of art, no different than, you know, the truck guys drooling all over their saws up on the roof, right? They're putting that hole in the exact spot the captain, the senior, however it works in your organization, want to put it. When you search, you are searching deliberately, and that's your mission, is search. And yes, along the search path, might you find some fire, might you pull some ceiling? Yeah, but again, that's a deliberate, disciplined action. It's not just cowboy, kick doors, and backdraft, and all that crap. It's literally, like I said, those two words.
What's one book or resource that you think every firefighter should read?
Man, that's an impossible question to answer.
I mean, I know you said
absolutely
the book of search, right? But
yeah, Book of Search. Buy it now. No, I think that's a good one. For me, the Book of Andy. It all starts with engine company operations. Whether you want to be on a truck, you want to be on a squad, you want to do rooftop rescues, it all starts with understanding how the engine company operates. The Book of Andy, whether it be the official, the unofficial, the PDF, whichever edition, right? But I was just looking at it yesterday. I think Fire Engineering has it back in stock as the official book, but it's got all the articles from Fire Nuggets and Fire Engineering. I think that's a good one. One that changed me, and I think maybe the modern one is Castros and Brush's book in terms of command mindset, but one that changed me was John Norman's book, because I had to read it when I made captain, and that was an impactful book for me.
the Fire Officer's
Dave
Handbook,
McGrail's
or
the Fire Officer Handbook.
yeah.
It's a little over some people's heads because it's FDNY-ish, but a lot of the mindset and understanding and hazards are built in there. And I think Brush and Castro's book, I'm still in the middle of it. That's really good. The Tom Brennan book with his just thoughts from the firehouse is another one that's kind of abstract that people don't really mention. It's a really good book. It's really good because Tom Brennan's one of the dudes, right? Like, it was a really good book as well. And there's plenty of leadership books out there. I think Mindset, if you're looking for Mindset, The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker, and what's the other one by Lawrence Gonzalez? I always forget that one. But look up those two authors, and then I give you another one for just casual reading, is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Look it up. It's by last guy's name's Manson, which is kind of creepy, but it's a really good book on goal setting and mindset, even in your personal life. I think that's an important piece of what we do too.
What's as long as you can talk about it, what's the biggest leadership challenge that you faced?
I think going to an ARF station and challenging people who are on their way out in a realm I don't understand. And I think now it'll be a separate challenge of dealing with people it's going to be fireman problems, right? Like, I'm going to have some really aggressive folks that we know what problems those bring.
Well, Jonah, I appreciate you sitting down with me. I know originally I was like, yeah, we'll sit down for about an hour. We've been here for 2 hours, but I've enjoyed the conversation. And where can people find you if they want to get a hold of you?
Hornet Fire Training, Facebook, Jonah Smith on Facebook, or come to FDIC, a couple different places. I look forward to meeting more people.
And
it's always fun.
Do you have anything coming up that you want to put out real quick?
FDIC, and we got the engine school in South Carolina that'll be coming up in January, but that's already that sells out every year, so that's a gone one. But yeah, that's it.
All right. Well, Jonah, I appreciate you sitting down with me on Frontline Mindset today. Hang out for a minute here. After I do our outro. But everybody, this is Rob from Frontline Mindset with National Fire Radio. Jonah Smith delivered 2 hours of nonstop information on mindset, and I couldn't have been more pleased. Like I said, I didn't think we were going to be sitting here this long, but I'm happy that we did. We will catch you on the next one. Thank you for tuning in.
National Fire Radio.